Hello, I've been wanting to do this video for probably years. It is because I'm very concerned about the Jovian interpretation. So, let me see if I can center my face a little better. Everything jitters. Oh, shit. This going on with finding the button to push or any of that. It's all really challenging. Anyway, good morning. Today is All Saints Day, and it's a beautiful day here in New Mexico. Sunny, gorgeous. Anyway, I want to talk about what Rod did and what I consider was his crime. And so I want to go back to that first place where Rod taught us and a few students the human design system as he first presented it, which was that he had already written the Ravy Ching and the Human Design System book. That's all clear. That is his work. But the later interpretation of the types and the church that this guy created is not to dismiss. I mean, that guy really did a belief system. You look at the chart and you come to this first interpretation, and that's what I want to talk about. It is really evident to me that Frog, he didn't like people. He insulted people all the time. And he was very critical, like the type of generator. The defined sacral was something that was the only women that he would go for, is women with defined sacral centers. But I think that is a clue. And I learned this about the sacral center for being in a relationship with Ra, that the resource thing, man, you're around him and you know he is starving. And really, he got angry with me in the second year. Where's my money? And it was really just like, I have to, at that time, I would do credit card deposits and they would have to clear. So I didn't give him the money right away because first it had to get credited to the bank. But anyway, this man was absolutely desperate about money, and he had many reasons to being desperate. But this was central to our issue, that he felt ripped off, and so he would constantly push this thing. And, we were also the reason that he didn't easily pay for what costs Chaitan and Ishta had for having him come. He just would say, I've already paid Zeno, and, this was at the end. But he had that torture that somebody else, Chaitan, also with his undefined sacral center, was also having that uh, harm because Ra paid us. And so he was clear he was not going to pay anyone else. In other words, we asked him to support his cost, promoting him and whatever. And he was, okay with it. But it was something obvious that no one else got that privilege. Anyway, that's not the crime, though. The thing I want to say is what happens when somebody believes him and they take that to heart, that they need to wait to be invited or wait to respond or whatever that might be. It's probably okay as a sentence and a phrase, but what is problematic is that it requires not that you figure out for yourself why that is said, but rather that you get to take his word for it. Oh, you're on the cross. This is the cross of Maya, whatever the heck that means. And, Ra came up with names. He liked naming things, and therefore he named the channels. He had keywords for all the hexagrams, and that was his goal. He wanted to name things, and he named crosses. And the first ones that he named, what is that? The Sphinx. That was the first. The second then was, I don't remember, maybe the Cross of Love or something. Anyway, because people would ask him, okay, now if that's a Sphinx, what cross am I on? And Ra, ever the marketeer, wanted to sell whatever he could. And he knew that he had a problem with that goal, the human design system per se. He could not claim as his. He knew that. And therefore, he had to claim all the rest, which was his interpretation of the system. And the first thing that you would want to know is, it cannot be copyrighted. His book can be copyrighted. The contents in his book can be copyrighted, but the system itself cannot be copyrighted. And I think he knew that much. This was, he would ask me or someone else to trademark, and it was obvious that he had to put his name on it. And that was his problem. He wanted everything just free of tax and government, and so no problem to understand. But in fact, that mess was because he was not clearly able to say, it's my copyright, it's my trademark. He couldn't say that, and he knew it. And so, but he was very interested in leaving something to his children. And so what he came up with was his interpretation, which can be copyrighted. So that means his cross book and his reaching and planets fixing lines, all that stuff he could copyright. And now I want to go back to what he ended up interpreting and why I was so, let's call it, desperate that it would be something that people would understand, that he claims it is like this. I tell you, it's like this. Take my word for it. That wish that people took his word for it was the issue. In other words, they didn't know themselves. And you listen to people using Ra's phrases and interpretations and so on, that is what he could own. All right, now, that said, I'm going to start with the Ravi Ching and planets fixing the lines. All right, so now I've been already working for a couple of years, and I began this thing that if you need to use planets fixing the lines, you have to use the Ravi Ching, and therefore you're beholden unto Ra forever. So I asked a few people, Bettina and Chetan, is it possible that you don't have to have planets fix the lines? And Bettina said, no, Chetan too. Oh, I proved that it's real. I think good. But neither of them convinced me that they needed to use it. It was just that they did use it and would verify. And so it's not the same as saying it was necessary. And I was glad about that. Good. I would want to throw it away. And you look, this guy, of all the arrogance, he thought he could write an I Ching. Now, I'm going to stop there. The I Ching is an ancient book of wisdom and guidance for living a virtuous life. And Ra's interpretation is based on the heart center, or the ego, being the most important three-dimensional reality of anything. And so he wanted, Ra personally wanted to not be blamed for anything. So he had that no fault being. And really, you and I might be blamed, but Ra wanted to make sure that he was not blamed. Come on. You can't get up here, huh? Sorry. I have this cute dog who is completely stuck because I have this table and the legs in her way. So she is finding another way around. Come on. It's good. Come on. Yeah. All right. She's out. So no fault dreams. So Ra's choice then of doing the interpretation was resulting in, I am allowed to do this jerk thing because it's my design. And really, that is the summation of what he did. And I think this is horrible. And really, part of what motivates me, that here was Ra wanting to interpret everything because the ego was strong. He could be telling people, no, you are having this design, it's reasonable. And because Chaitanya with his heart-centered definition and me with my solar plexus definition, Ra supported Chaitanya being an egoist to me. And of course, this was a ruination. I screamed and screamed and screamed about it. It was really awful that Chaitanya would come into the living room, say, and leave a load of crap and then walk away. In other words, Chaitanya could be emotionally disturbed, have a dump load of complaint, and not have to take any responsibility. So this freaked me out. And watching Ra, how he would use that interpretation of solar plexus was so awful that I really, I couldn't stand it with Chaitanya. And I would say, if I listen to the interpretations of people saying, oh, it's my design, I think one thing Rod did was he said, here's your get out of jail free card. You can use it anytime you want. It's by your design. You are a jerk. So, okay, accept that, and that's it. You make everyone else accept that you're a jerk. Now, I totally, categorically, 100% disagree with this use of human design. It is not to get away with things because you have no definition in this or that, but you should really understand that human design can be used by anyone for what the understanding of virtue is. Ra trained his students in the vice to be selfish, to think only of your own design and not how you are affecting someone else. And I think his interpretation, A, it's a belief, B, it does people harm, that the fact that it does harm and people can't go anywhere is the main issue that I have. Ra really did a terrible thing in saying, here is my interpretation. So I just go back a bit to say, Ra was a very narcissistic egoist, and if that is your guide for living an honest and authentic life, I am not able to argue. But I think he was absolutely not a guide whatsoever. If you care about who you are and what goes on planet Earth, if you want to be honest and learning to make the world a better place, then he cannot be your guide. You know, he was fulfilling the definition of a psychopath. And I think, although I got that as my first impression, not that he was a psychopath, but that he was dangerous, was something that now, 2015, I think, what a terrible judge of character I was. But, I really do think that over the years there was a battle of yin and yang, and Ra being that masculine, yang kind of human being, and me being that yin kind of human being. At some points, I would sort of see this cosmic battle waged between good and evil, and I would see myself in this heroic role that I absolutely had to uphold the notion of virtue and what it is to be authentic. I am a sannyasin, a disciple of Osho, and so for me, it's very evident that we absolutely must understand what it is to be true to ourselves and not follow somebody else, not join a church. Maybe there's benefit to being in a church, but the church that Ra Uru who created was one based on paying his kids forever, that he would be able to have those kids earn and have an inheritance from him. Ra came from a wealthy family and then got disowned because his father didn't approve of the actions that Ra did when he was a young man. And being disowned, I think, was kind of hard on him, that he wanted to leave his kids money. And because human design didn't seem to be bringing money in, he had to do a lot of dancing around, selling the rights to Russia or Australia or Italy, other countries, so that people would give him a chunk of money. Of course, it would just dissolve, go in to the nether regions. But I think Bro absolutely wanted that his kids had the benefit of money. Now, I think that was cruel too, because if you get money because you are tricking your customer, that's pretty questionable, kind of bad karma. Anyway, I want to say that his interpretation, what his blocks were, I think I mentioned in an earlier YouTube that channels were my first realization that you end up having memorized all the names, and you look at a chart and then you add that word and it goes nowhere. Okay, you have the channel of transformation. And then what happens to your client? Transformation. Oh, it's this. You make stuff up. You really have to understand what the ego does, how it would on one side inflate and on the other side insult, and people getting insulted would say, oh, I know, that's so true. And of course, then you got them, because by insulting them, they know that you saw who they really were. And in this way, he built up the, well, what's happening when you are reading that? You take on the insulting style, and of course you make stuff up to try to get through the feeling of being blocked. Now, I understood. I had a conversation maybe a year ago with Ilsa, who's in charge of interpreting readings from Austrian or other German-speaking people. And I would say that Elsa asked him to add more classes. You know, people needed to memorize more of what Ross said. So they ended up being deeply indoctrinated. And so let me just talk a little bit about this form of memes and mental viruses, that you come up with something, you put a rut in your brain, you remember this, you bring it up, and then it doesn't go anywhere, and then you get desperate, look for something else. Oh, now I can tell you about the cross you're on. I mean, you could listen to that guy forever and not know how he figured out how anybody's chart worked. That was something Bettina said, and I think she was right. She was an early student, that you would listen to Ra and you would just be so thrilled, but it would be that you needed another class. So in getting the next class, you would be able to figure out what the problem was. So, the belief is a form. Ra used memes, and that is something catchy, like, oh, you're a generator, you need to wait to respond. That's a meme. Now you tell somebody, and they know it too. So that means they look at a chart with the sacral center definition, even though they don't know anything else. They can say, oh, you're a generator, you need to wait to respond. And that meme form is the way that Ra created this church. I mean, the belief that human design system would help you. And Richard Rudd left human design after his 7-year practice, that he realized people didn't know how to treat each other better. And Eleanor left after, I don't know how many years, but I think 94, probably also 7 years, when she had Ra at her house and looked at anything medical. And of course, Eleanor, with her husband Marvin, proved that nothing Ra came up with worked. And so I think she was more offended that he had said, oh yeah, I'll pay you back. And it was also 10 grand, like her statistical analysis cost 20,000, and she paid, some university or something. And Ra was promising her that he would pay his half, of course. I think you really can't believe how deep his starvation was. And Eleanor had money, probably has, is more accurate. I think she is going to be a wealthy woman till the day she dies. But she also is not stupid. So having him not come through was enough. Like, she realized that he was not honest. And I think that I was the first. I think originally I thought why he was defaming me and running away from me as fast as he could was because he didn't want anybody to know that he was a fake, that he was a charlatan. The human design system in my world is not fake, but the way that he interpreted it was not useful. And so I went back to the beginning, and that is before. The way he described his experience was when he first got the system, he could tell people about the centers, but he couldn't say anything about channel names or keywords. That was all his raging. And that is the reason that he said that he didn't want me to use any other I Ching. He wanted people to be faithful to him and his interpretation. And so I think I'm now tired. I've got to stop. But thank you so much for listening this far. It is a big job. And if you are interested in human design and studying it without the Jovian slant, I am really happy that you would ask me questions or look at more videos or take classes. I have a lot of classes recorded that would get you what you need to know. Anyway, thank you again, and in the meantime, I hope you have a really good Saints' Day and all days following. Okay.